Imagine a floating monster, larger than many buildings, crossing oceans with a single purpose: to transport lives. A colossal ship over 200 meters long, capable of carrying up to 30,000 head of cattle, confined in a true metal maze. It's a herd so big that it surpasses the population of many entire cities. Inside this steel giant, thousands of animals face a silent journey, where profit dictates the rules and well-being is far from the spotlight. The largest cattle ship in the world is an impressive feat of engineering, but also a cruel portrait of how the force of the market can turn living beings into mere cargo. Are you ready to discover how this machine that moves billions works, and learn what really happens in there when no one is looking? Press play and come and find out. The largest cattle ship in the world, carrying 30,000 head of cattle. The truth may surprise you or revolt you. Few people know, but there is a silent industry sailing the seas of the world. That of cattle ships, vessels created exclusively to transport live animals, mainly bulls and cows, between continents. It all started with the need to meet international markets that were increasingly demanding fresh meat, slaughtered at the destination and not at the origin. Thus, these floating platforms emerged, transforming thousands of lives into a walking commodity. Countries like Australia, Brazil, and Uruguay are the largest exporters, sending millions of head of cattle annually to regions such as Middle East and Southeast Asia, where the demand for live meat is huge. But behind these impressive logistics lies a disturbing question. To what extent can the transport of living beings in extreme conditions be considered an advance or an ethical violation? And have you ever stopped to think? Why does the world still insist on loading entire herds of cattle onto ships, even with all the controversies? This is no ordinary ship. It is a real floating fortress designed to support the weight, movement, and even suffering of thousands of animals at the same time. The largest cattle ship in the world is known as MV Ocean Drover, an Australian vessel that has become a reference in this type of transport. Its dimensions are impressive. More than 200 meters long, the equivalent of 2 football fields, about 30 meters wide, and a load capacity that exceeds 30,000 head of cattle in a single trip. Inside, the scene is one of amidal labyrinth, with overlapping floors, containment systems, and partitions to keep the animals organized. But don't be fooled. Although the engineering promises comfort and safety, the images are shocking. Confined cattle, little space to move, and a routine of noise, heat, and tension. The ship is equipped with systems forced ventilation to renew the air and reduce thermal stress, automatic ventilation system, food and hydration, and even systems of waste removal. But in the end, all of this serves a single purpose: to keep the animals alive until the moment of unloading. And then a new question arises. Does this whole structure really guarantee well-being? Or is it just prolongs the suffering? Imagine the scene. Thousands of oxen, one after the other, being pushed, forced to climb metal ramps narrow, heading towards an unknown destination. A ship that will take them across entire oceans. The logistics for shipping to 30,000 head of cattle is a spectacle of organization and also of tension. Before boarding, the animals go through processes of identification, weighing, and sanitary inspection. Veterinarians assess your physical condition, but the main criterion is not comfort, but rather your ability to endure the journey. Boarding takes place at specialized ports with infrastructure to move large volumes of live animals. Trained teams made up of farm hands, handlers, and operators guide the cattle with instruments that stimulate movement, sounds, touches, shocks. Each ox enters the ship and is directed to a specific compartment along with others, forming groups that will remain confined for days or even weeks. The operation needs to be fast, efficient, but is often marked by stress, injuries, and in some cases, deaths, before the ship even sets sail. And so the question remains, is the focus in this process really on life, or just on the profit it represents? Once inside the ship, the cattle are left to an environment where space is minimal, the air is heavy, and the routine merciless. During the entire trip, which can last from 1 to 3 weeks, the oxen are fed with specific rations, stored in giant silos that are part of the ship's structure. Drinking water is produced by systems of desalination, transforming seawater into water suitable for animal consumption. It all seems very well planned, doesn't it? But the reality is that despite the automatic systems of food and hydration, overcrowding and the stressor inevitable, the animals move little, bump into each other, and many end up getting injured or sick during the journey. Veterinarians on board monitor the health of the herd, but with thousands of lives confined, it is virtually impossible to guarantee individualized care. Systems of forced ventilation try to alleviate the heat and renew the air. But when the outside temperature rises, the environment turns into a muffled chamber where every minute is a challenge to survival. And if an animal doesn't survive, it is removed and discarded at sea, in accordance with international regulations. So the question arises, is it possible to talk about animal welfare in this scenario? Or are we just covering up a cruel reality? These cattle ships do not cross the seas by chance. They follow well-defined routes, designed to satisfy the insatiable hunger of distant markets, where the meat needs to arrive alive, fresh, ready to be slaughtered according to cultural or religious traditions. The Brazil, Australia, and the Uruguay are the largest exporters of live cattle in the world. From their ports, these giants set off for countries such as Egypt, Turkey, Indonesia, Vietnam, and mainly for the markets of Middle East. Trips can last days or even whole weeks depending on the destination. They face storms, sudden changes in temperature, and rough seas. For animals, each wave is not just a swing, but a physical and mental test. Many arrive exhausted, dehydrated, injured, and not all survive the journey. The choice of sea transport of live cattle is not random. In these destination countries, local slaughter is a cultural and religious requirement, mainly to ensure that the meat is considered halal, that is, slaughtered according to Islamic precepts. But behind these traditions and trade agreements, an uncomfortable question looms. To what extent should we tolerate such long and exhausting hours, just to satisfy customs or maintain billion-dollar contracts? Behind the grandeur of these maritime operations, there is a shadow that cannot be ignored. The ethical controversies and strong criticism that this type of transport awakens throughout the world. Organizations of animal protection classify the maritime transport of live cattle as one of the most cruel of the modern agricultural industry. Reports and investigations show animals suffering from overcrowding, malnutrition, injuries, and in many cases, deaths on the high seas. And most disturbingly, when animals die on board, their bodies are simply thrown into the sea, following international standards that, in practice, transform water into an invisible cemetery. Governments and regulatory bodies try to enforce rules and protocols to minimize suffering. They require minimum space per animal, adequate ventilation systems, and veterinary care. But critics say that even with all these measures, the practice itself is incompatible with animal welfare. Recent cases of international scandals, such as the blocking of ships carrying sick or dead animals, only reinforce the urgency of the debate. Isn't it time to rethink this practice? Or will the market logic continue once again, overriding ethics, transforming lives into numbers, and suffering into profit? The largest cattle ship in the world is, without a doubt, engineering feat, but also a controversial symbol of our ability to transform lives into commodities. He represents the relentless force of global agribusiness, which moves billions and feeds populations. But, at the same time, raises profound questions about the ethical limits of this industry. After knowing this reality, the question that remains is, we are facing inevitable need, or a practice that needs to be urgently rethought. Do you think shipping live cattle by sea is a practical solution to supplying the world, or cruelty disguised as progress? Leave your opinion in the comments. Share this video and help bring this reflection to more people. Because the truth is clear. While we don't talk about it, thousands of lives continue boarding after boarding, sailing silently to the end of the line.